What is going on, everyone? Joe Anklem here, and this is going to be the intro video into a series where I'm going to be breaking down my specific training for really the last 3-4 years specifically, and getting into a little bit more specifics within that. Today's video is going to give you a little bit of an overview of what things have been like and give you a little bit background of where I have been, the things that I've done, and what has kind of changed my mindset on a lot of things as I've gotten older, learned a lot, and experienced a lot when it comes to fitness as a whole. So if you have followed this channel for a while, you've seen my past videos where I was really focused on strength training as well as hypertrophy training, and I have really focused on natural bodybuilding and the natural bodybuilding community in the past. And that is definitely something that is still a major part of my world today and a major part of my training. One of the major things that has evolved, though, is my views and specifically my training protocols when it comes to cardiovascular training as well as specifically running and cycling. So basically, I want to get into a little bit more details as far as how these things correspond and essentially break that down further. But today, I want to give you a little bit of background about who I am, where I've been, if you are unfamiliar with the channel or if you're a new subscriber, and also if you are someone who's watched me from back in the day, just to give you a little bit of a refresher. And so essentially, we will be talking about where I've been, getting into a little bit of details within the last 3 years, starting in 2019, and then working our way till today and giving you some breakdown as far as my current training split as well. And so essentially, if you have followed this channel for a while, you know that in the past I was really focused on building muscle, focusing on strength training, and simultaneously putting those two things together. At this point, I was really minimal with the amount of cardio that I was doing because as someone who was smaller and had trouble putting on size as a kid, I weighed 125 pounds when I graduated high school, and when I wrestled in high school, my freshman year, I was 112 pounds as far as a weight class. And I was cutting weight to get there, but I was about 120 pounds essentially all throughout high school. And so at 5'7", 120 pounds is not necessarily the best sort of size to be, and at that time I was planning to play college football. So I have an athletic background. I've always been a smaller kid though, always been short and pretty small. In 8th grade I weighed just 90 pounds and I was under 5 foot in 8th grade. And so essentially once I get into high school, that's when I basically grew a bit and got to my size now at 5'7", but I still was pretty skinny and I always struggled to gain weight. And this really did hamper my abilities when it came to especially my favorite sport and the sport that I was best at, which was football.
Now we'll scramble. Cooley across the 25, 30, out the 35, and he is belted at the 36-yard line.
Good job of staying on his feet and spinning out of that block. And
there's Anklem earlier.
There's a previous play right there.
And so when I got out of high school, I did decide to play college football. I was going to go to UW Oshkosh and play football there at the D3 level. And that is when I knew that I needed to learn more about nutrition, especially when it comes to building muscle. And also I needed to really take my training a lot more serious to basically put on the weight that I needed in order to perform as best as I could. And so that summer when I was going into my freshman year of college is when I really took things to the next level. This led me to essentially decide that I actually didn't want to pursue football, and I actually wanted to continue training and learning as much as I possibly could because I had people reaching out, and this is when the light bulb kind of went off that this is something that I wanted to do and something that I enjoyed doing. And not only did I enjoy testing those things on myself as far as programming, nutrition, how to build muscle, how to hit those strength PRs and really do the best as far as your athletic performance as well, but I wanted to also do that with others and help them reach the same levels and the same goals that I had and relay the knowledge and the experience that I had developed. And so this is basically what led me to my first in-person training job, what led me then to start my online training, and then eventually I went full-time online. And so basically in that time period, I was able to hit some really cool numbers as far as my body weight specifically. I did get up to 165, and this was basically the number that was the real max that I could get to without really having to force feed myself and really get to a point where it was almost a negative extreme of having to, again, force feed, push myself, and get to a place where I was just not necessarily wanting to go. And this was something that was a little bit unrealistic for me, where I was having to consume so many calories that it just wasn't feasible for my specific hunger at the time. And it just kind of created a quality of life that I did not enjoy, where I was very food focused because I was trying to hit such a large amount of food, and the give and take of me eating maybe not necessarily the best quality of foods with specifically my family history that I have with health problems. It made me kind of realize that when it comes to my overall health and fitness, I don't want to push things to such an extreme that I'm going to end up having a drawback for my health in other negatives in other ways. And I think this was a maturity thing for me, but this was something that, again, was cool to get to, and it was fun at the time because I was very strong. I had a lot of muscle mass at 165, especially at 5'7", and with my genetics, I definitely put on muscle, and you can see it pretty easily. So it was really cool to see those changes, of course. But again, the drawbacks were a little bit too great for me. So basically, my peak was at that 165 weight, and I did push upwards of 170 at certain points, but I was really only able to maintain 165 for the most part. At that point, I was able to fluctuate a little bit lower, where I wasn't pushing the calories so much, and I was able to keep my protein high, maintain most of that muscle, but lose a little bit of that major body fat for myself. And for me, it actually was a better set point for my body, where again, my body is naturally a little bit skinnier and leaner. So essentially, when I did drop my calories down and stopped the force feeding but kept my protein high, I did drop a little bit of that excess glycogen that was mainly that 5 to 10 pounds. And so essentially, I was fluctuating between 150 to 160 for quite a bit amount of time. And when I would push things and really keep the calories higher, I was able to push to 165, 170. But again, that's when I was pushing myself into the extreme. And we have what's called body fat set points. And this was something that really made sense to me because, again, that 165, 170 mark for me and my specific genetics is where I'm pushing that extreme on the top end of that envelope, where my body just doesn't like being focused on food that much, and honestly, I just can't consume as many calories as I need to and feel good and not feel like, again, I'm so lethargic or I'm stuffed all the time. So the give and take for me just wasn't there. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there's the body fat set point that is too extreme when you go too low of body fat. And so this can be the other end of the spectrum. And we'll get to that more later. But as far as my top end, that was the peak that I was reaching. And so essentially I kind of realized that, and I weighed things out. And I really weighed things out, again, from a health perspective and also from a performance perspective at this time, and probably more from a performance perspective at this time. But I really was starting to kind of change my views on things and even implement a little bit of cardio at that time. Not much, maybe once a week, maybe here and there I was doing a little bit more sort of athletic-based training. But again, I was starting to change my views on things a little bit when it came to my overall health and fitness and how that did relate to my strength and performance goals. So at this point, I really realized that I didn't have to force feed myself and I didn't have to push myself in terms of my weight always going up and up and up. And I realized that I was actually a little bit more content and actually feeling better just overall at that 150 to 160 sort of point, where it was a good sweet spot for me. And so I basically was weighing between that 150 to 160 mark, just depending on my eating, for quite a bit amount of time, basically up until 2019. And so in 2019, I essentially was able to really revamp my training because I joined a new gym that had some great equipment, and I was actually able to get back to a place that I had been before, but really sort of push the envelope again with my training. And in the past, prior to that, I was able to do some really cool things in that 150 to 160 range. So at about 155, I was able to deadlift 455 for 2, and I was also able to squat 405 at 155. And my all-time bench isn't the greatest, but it was 255, and that's coming from someone who had never benched 225 realistically until I was a couple of years out of high school. So chest has always been something that has been a weakness for me, and also again being a skinnier kid and being always the small on the smaller side. being able to bench 225 for 3 was incredible. And so that is something that was a milestone for me as well at 155. And on the athletic performance side, I was able to do a 64-inch 3-step box jump, and that is just 3 inches lower than my actual height. And so essentially, I was able to keep a lot of the athleticism that I always had wanted and always had, but I was able to also even increase that because of the muscle mass and strength that I was able to put on, which was a really cool thing to see. And this was something that was really awesome, especially, again, being always on the smaller side when I was a kid. And so in 2019, again, I was really pushing myself. Things were going awesome. And then we got into 2020.